A little less than a year and a half ago, Nintendo released their handheld home console hybrid, the Switch. If you're one of the elusive few that's watched my older videos, you might remember me making a video or two about the Nintendo Switch before it launched. In those videos, I was intensely pessimistic about Nintendo's next console and their future at large. At the time, it was a reasonable opinion to have. The Wii U was an abject failure, and, on paper at least, the Switch seemed to be stubbornly doubling down on what the Wii U tried and failed to do. There are still some issues now, and potentially in the future, but for the most part, I was wrong. Not only is Switch a commercial success, but it's also become my personal favorite of the current gen consoles. I'm starting with the hardware, because that's the thing I hated most about the Wii U, and I don't think it was or is as talked about as it should be. For me, every encounter with the Wii U was miserable. The console itself is easily the most uninspired design that Nintendo has ever put out, but the trouble begins when you have to interact with the thing. The Wii U's gimmick was bringing the DS experience to the big screen. Seeing as most home setups have only one screen, Nintendo provided the second in the box. This second screen was called the gamepad, and it was the bane of my existence. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the gamepad is inferior to just about any other controller created in the past 15 years. It's massive, the entire front is coated in cheap, glossy plastic, the touchscreen isn't capacitive, and its less than 5-hour battery life puts the final nail in the coffin. If you opted for the slightly more tolerable Pro Controller, you got an experience more in line with a traditional console. Even then, the Wii U still refused to let you forget about the gamepad. New firmware update? You need the gamepad. Syncing your new Pro Controller with the console? You need the gamepad. Playing Captain Toad Treasure Tracker? You need the gamepad. For me, this stubborn design was what made the Wii U such a drag. There were a handful of great games that I loved on the system, but to enjoy those games, I had to endure the horror that was the system. I didn't see any value in the Wii U's gimmick, and its sales numbers suggest that the general public didn't see that value either. Just like the Wii U, the Switch has a gimmick, but this time it's a full measure compared to the Wii U's half measure. Unlike the Wii U, the Switch allows you to completely ignore its gimmick with no consequences. If you so desired, you could permanently leave it in dock mode and go the rest of your life without ever touching a Joy-Con. This is good design, but what's even better is that the Switch's gimmick actually adds value and sets it apart from the other two 8th gen consoles in a compelling way. The Switch not only surpasses the incredibly low bar of its predecessor by being well made and designed, but it's also one of the most interesting and unique pieces of tech that I've used in quite some time. The Switch is certainly not a premium device by any stretch of the imagination. I was pretty ignorant in my unboxing video and said that it was made of metal or something, and that is incorrect. The exterior is primarily constructed of plastic, of the non-glossy variety this time around, with the only visible metal being the rail that the Joy-Cons connect with. Despite this, it's a sturdy device with little to no flex or creaking. It's a massive upgrade from the gamepad. The body is utilitarian, with the Joy-Cons adding a splash of color depending on which model you opted for, and it manages to be pretty thin and light for what it is. It even uses USB Type-C. This is clearly a reformed Nintendo. Moving on to the screen, we now have a 6.2-inch capacitive touchscreen at a resolution of 1280 by 720. That might be a low resolution in the world of 1440p smartphones, but when it comes to games, it's more than adequate. Games look sharp, perhaps better than they do in dock mode, and it's not like it would be able to push a resolution higher than 720p for most games in portable mode anyway. The only real issue with the screen is that it's made of plastic. This makes it prone to scratches, especially when inserted and removed from the dock. Because of this, I highly recommend spending a few bucks on a tempered glass screen protector, which has the added benefit of making the screen feel more premium. Speaking of the dock, it's the cheapest thing about the Switch, but it's also the part you're going to interact with the least. Currently, the dock does nothing more than give the handheld an HDMI out, a few USB Type-A's, and constant power. Games will often run at a higher resolution in dock mode, but the dock itself doesn't have any hardware that boosts performance. However, I wouldn't be surprised if a few years down the road, we see them release a new version of the dock that does give the console a performance boost. The Joy-Cons are the only controller included in the box, and this is where we start having some real issues. There's no problem with the build quality, they're very well made, but the ergonomics aren't ideal. The one thing the Wii U gamepad got right was the thumbstick placement. The asymmetrical sticks on the Joy-Cons make the Switch rather uncomfortable for me in handheld mode. Whenever my right thumb is on the stick, which is almost always, my pinky and ring fingers are forced to rest below the right-hand corner of the unit. It feels cramped, and I can never manage to get a good grip on the thing. This could potentially be fixed if Nintendo or a third party released a right Joy-Con with the stick on top and ABXY on the bottom, but since Nintendo likes the asymmetrical layout enough to make it part of the Switch's logo, I doubt we'll be seeing that anytime soon. For dock mode, Nintendo provides a Joy-Con grip in the box. It's a noble idea that plays into the Switch concept, but man, it just sucks. The size of the sticks is more than adequate for portable use, but for a full-on console experience, it leaves a lot to be desired. The square shape doesn't help matters either. The solution here is to purchase the $70 Pro Controller. Yes, it's expensive, but unlike the Wii U's Pro Controller, you're not just getting something more tolerable. This controller is every bit as good, if not better, than the DualShock 4 and Xbox One controller. It has the perfect weight, perfect density, and feels phenomenal in hand. The only thing that stops me from using it for PC games is the binary triggers. Not sure why they went that route, but for Switch games, it hasn't been an issue at all. If you play in dock mode a lot, this thing is mandatory. I regret not getting it sooner, as it single-handedly changed my impression of the Switch. It really makes dock mode a full-on console experience. I think Nintendo needs to find a way to get the Pro Controller in the box, even if it's by way of some sort of deluxe bundle that costs more than the standard unit. Aside from that Joy-Con issue, the hardware is great, but a console's success is dependent upon its game library. This was one of my biggest concerns about the Switch, as the Wii U was a notoriously dry platform. That's not to say that it didn't have good games, it most certainly did. Mario Kart 8, Smash 4, Mario 3D World, and Splatoon all come to mind, but this decent first-party support just wasn't enough to sustain the system. The Switch's launch was alarmingly sparse, with Zelda Breath of the Wild being the only worthwhile exclusive. But against all odds, Switch would go on to have a stellar first-year lineup. This is already a system with a solid selection of games, both first and third party, and those games are diverse. Aside from Zelda, Nintendo also released Splatoon 2, ARMS, Super Mario Odyssey, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 within the first few months of the Switch's existence. ARMS is, well, whatever, but to have Zelda, Splatoon, and Mario in year one? That's remarkable. But they didn't stop there. The failure of the Wii U has proven to be a blessing in disguise for the Switch, as they have a catalog of great games that can be given a second life on this already more successful platform. First-year Wii U ports include Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Bayonetta 2, and Pokken Tournament DX. More recent ones include Captain Toad Treasure Tracker and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Of course, these are not Switch exclusives, but they are exclusive to Nintendo, and they've been instrumental in bolstering the Switch's library. After all, many, if not most, Switch owners didn't have a Wii U, so these are brand new games for a lot of people. I'm generally not a fan of rampant re-releases, but this is one instance where it makes complete sense. All things considered, I think the Switch had the best first year of any console in recent memory.
Once we saw the new console together with the new controller, my mind immediately started racing to what we can do with this in the world of sports.
I call it the Swiss Army knife of controllers. It does absolutely everything you could want.
This new controller really revolutionizes the traditional pad. Connectivity, advanced graphic, and engaging interface.
Nintendo launched the Wii U with an emphasis on third-party support, and we all know how well that worked out. After the first year, that support all but vanished. When they promised the same thing again with the Switch, I was understandably skeptical, but they've proven me wrong yet again. Switch has games such as Rocket League, Sonic Mania, LA Noire, and of course, Fortnite. Bethesda has been a staunch supporter of the platform, putting out competent ports of Skyrim, Doom, and Wolfenstein 2. Even Ubisoft put together that Mario and Rabbids abomination, and indie games like Stardew Valley and Celeste are right at home on the platform. More recently, Nintendo published the Square Enix-developed Octopath Traveler, a Switch-exclusive JRPG that is doing surprisingly well. The rest of 2018 is Smash Ultimate and not much else. Smash is a big deal, and it looks like it'll be enough to satiate most Switch owners for the foreseeable future, but it would have been nice to have at least one more big game for the holiday 2018 season. The future is looking bright for Switch though, as we have a mainline Pokemon game, Bayonetta 3, a new Fire Emblem, Shin Megami Tensei 5, and the return of Metroid Prime to look forward to. It's a solid lineup, and there's undoubtedly more that's yet to be announced, but I do see a few potential issues that the Switch will have to contend with in the future. The imminent launch of the Nintendo Online service is perhaps the most puzzling. As much as I hate it, charging console owners for online play is nothing new, and Nintendo is only asking for $20 a year, but what's odd is that this will go into effect over a year after the launch of the console. The service also adds online save backup and 20 NES games, but the average person is understandably going to be questioning why they need to pay to get what they previously enjoyed for free. A bigger issue is the looming next-gen consoles from Microsoft and Sony. Not only will they steal the spotlight, but their release will have a massive effect on third-party development. The Switch's Tegra-based hardware is already weak, so imagine how large the gap will be between it and a PlayStation 5. Since these third-party games are primarily developed for the PlayStation and Xbox platforms, and then scaled down for the Switch's less capable hardware, it's going to be even more difficult, or in some cases impossible, for someone like Bethesda to bring their games over, and we'll start to see them put out less and less. I don't know how badly the Switch needs games like Doom, they seem more like a distraction than a pivotal part of the lineup, but less games is never a good thing. Ultimately, the biggest question is how committed Nintendo will be to this platform in the coming years. I say this because the president of Nintendo recently stated that they were considering various possibilities for a 3DS successor. I understand the allure of making a new 3DS, as the 3DS has sold nearly 80 million units, but I don't think it's the right move. Nintendo consoles depend on first-party support, and since third-party support will inevitably ease up going forward, it makes Nintendo's allocation of resources that much more important. If Nintendo splits their development between Switch and a new handheld, which, by the way, the Switch already is, they might end up neglecting one or supporting both inadequately. I also think the Switch being a one-stop shop for all things Nintendo is part of its appeal, and that would be greatly diminished if they put out a new dedicated handheld. However, all of this is a few years off, and as it stands, Switch is a strong platform, but more importantly, it's fun. I love finding out how games fare between portable and dock mode. Splatoon 2 is vastly superior in dock mode with a Pro Controller, yet Mario Odyssey feels just as good in portable mode. Then you have a game like Captain Toad, a former Wii U title that made heavy use of the gamepad's touchscreen. If you play it in dock mode, you permanently have a cursor on the screen as a replacement for the touch input, but if you play in handheld, there is no cursor and you just use the touchscreen. You could certainly argue that this frequent lack of absolute parity between dock and portable mode is a downside, but I think it's quite a bit of fun. Nothing is ever bad enough to be unplayable. It's more like the difference between listening to music with headphones or speakers. I'm not the type of person that games on the go, but the handful of times that I've traveled with my Switch have been great. I didn't use it in transit or anything, but being able to transport a full console so easily is something new. In that sense, Nintendo has fully realized what Sony intended with the Vita. If you're looking for a fun device that also happens to have an already strong game catalog, the Switch is a great choice. That Nintendo could not only come out with a device as interesting as this, but come out with it after the Wii U is nothing short of incredible. Sometimes it's not so bad to be wrong. If you have a Switch, I'd be curious to know what you think of it, and if you agree that it had the best first year of any console in recent memory. Again, I just can't overstate how much I like the system. I've been playing the hell out of mine, and Splatoon 2 has become a go-to multiplayer game for me. If you enjoyed the video, Lion, Scribble, all that stuff, and until next time, thanks for watching.